In the quiet hours before sleep, when the world settles and the mind softens, it becomes easier to imagine how different life once was. Before modern logic, before science, before the comfort of certainty, humans lived in a world that felt unpredictable and often frightening. Every shadow held a possibility, every illness a mystery, every misfortune a warning from gods, spirits, or unseen forces. And in that world, laws, strange as they may sound today, were not simply rules, they were shields. Long before nations and empires, early communities survived on fragile trust. A single bad harvest could doom an entire village. A disease could wipe out families in days. And without explanations for why these things happened, people looked for patterns, for meaning, for anything to hold on to. So they created rules to keep chaos away. Some of these rules were wise, others were desperate. Many, over time, became remarkably odd. Some laws grew from fear of invisible forces, of curses, of upsetting the natural balance. If a belief said that cutting down a sacred tree would anger the gods, then a law would soon forbid it. If people believed that a certain animal carried protective spirits, harming it became unthinkable. To break such laws wasn't just a crime, it was a cosmic risk. Other laws came from scarcity. Food, water, fuel, and resources were limited, and leaders needed ways to ration them, forbidding people from baking oversized bread, preventing families from owning too many animals, or demanding strict control over common goods. May sound strange now, but in a world of famine and uncertainty, these rules kept whole communities alive. Still others grew from superstition, from the human need to assign order to randomness. If a certain action coincided with misfortune, people assumed the action caused it. And so, laws were made, laws banning nighttime whistling, laws regulating clothing colors, laws dictating how one must walk, speak, or behave in order to avoid tempting fate. Then there were laws created by authority, by rulers who used strange regulations as symbols of power. Kings who banned luxurious clothing to remind people of their place. Emperors who restricted certain foods or materials so only the elite could enjoy them. Dictators who forced bizarre customs simply to test obedience. To obey such laws was to prove loyalty. To disobey was to challenge the very structure of society. Many strange laws emerged from misunderstandings, scientific beliefs that were later proven wrong, medical theories that seem ridiculous today, and moral ideas shaped by limited knowledge. But for the people of those times, these laws felt rational, even necessary. And finally, some laws came from culture, from traditions so deeply rooted that questioning them felt like questioning reality itself. Rituals, customs, and symbolic practices eventually hardened into legal codes, preserved for generations, even after their original meaning faded. Tonight, as we begin this journey through history's strangest laws, remember this: none of these rules were created in a vacuum. Behind every bizarre restriction, every odd regulation, every law that makes us raise an eyebrow today, there were real people, frayed, hopeful, desperate, or ambitious, trying to make sense of a world that often refused to make sense at all. And so, we begin our story, not with judgment, but with understanding, with a calm breath, with curiosity, with the gentle recognition that humans, across every era, did the best they could with what they had. Now, let us wander deeper into time, where the strangest laws ever recorded quietly wait to be discovered. before cities rose from stone and empires carved their borders into the earth. Humanity lived in small cluster tribes, villages, and wandering groups who faced the world not as conquerors, but as survivors. In those early days, law was not something written on clay or carved into tablets. It was not debated in halls or proclaimed by kings. It was born from necessity, shaped by the fragile balance between life and death. Imagine a world without storage, without medicine, without predictable seasons. A world where food could vanish from the land without warning, where storms could swallow a settlement in a single night, and where a simple injury could mean the end. In that environment, order, even the smallest form of it, became precious. And so, rules emerged like stones placed along a dark path, guiding people away from danger. At first, the laws were simple. Don't wander too far from the group. Don't waste food. Don't disturb certain animals. Don't build a fire too close to the forest. These rules weren't just advice, they were the difference between survival and disaster. Over time, as generations passed, these practical instructions evolved into traditions, and traditions, repeated long enough, hardened into laws. The origins of strange laws can often be traced back to these early instincts. Take the regulation of food. Many ancient societies developed strict rules about how grain should be shared, how water should be drawn, or when hunting was allowed. These weren't random restrictions. They were crafted during famines, droughts, and harsh winters, when one careless decision could endanger everyone. What appears strange now was once a shield against starvation. Even stranger were laws surrounding ritual and superstition. When people didn't understand why diseases spread or why natural disasters struck, they turned to symbols, spirits, and omens for protection. Certain trees could not be cut, certain animals could not be harmed, and certain days were forbidden for travel or work. Breaking such rules wasn't just a personal choice. It was believed to endanger the entire community by angering the unseen forces that governed the world. Then came the need for leadership. As groups grew larger, someone needed to settle disputes, assign roles, and keep peace during tense moments. Early leaders, elders, chiefs, spiritual guides created rules that reflected their understanding of the world. Sometimes wise, sometimes superstitious, sometimes deeply unusual, but always rooted in the same goal: preserving harmony. As humanity advanced, these early systems laid the foundation for the legal codes we study today. And woven into them, like forgotten threads, are the remnants of beliefs that once shaped everyday life, beliefs that seem strange only because the world has changed. Many strange laws, even the bizarre ones that make us laugh or shake our heads, began as acts of protection. Protection from the wild, protection from hunger, protection from the unknown, and sometimes protection from each other. Tonight, as we trace the evolution of order, remember this: laws were never meant only to restrict, they were meant to reassure. They helped communities sleep at night, knowing that somewhere, someone had drawn boundaries around chaos. And in the chapters ahead, as we explore the oddest, most surprising laws ever enforced, you'll see that each one carries echoes of this ancient instinct. The instinct to survive in a world that once felt overwhelmingly unpredictable. Now, let's continue our quiet journey into antiquity, where civilizations first recorded their rules in stone, where some of the strangest laws in human history were born. In the soft glow of candlelight, It's easy to imagine the quiet streets of ancient towns, people moving cautiously, whispering warnings, consulting the stars for guidance, wary of unseen forces. In such a world, fear was never far away, and laws often reflected it. Humans have always sought safety in structure. But when uncertainty looms, structure can take curious, sometimes startling forms. Ancient rulers and lawmakers understood this, and they often used laws to channel fear, to calm panic, or to maintain control over their people. Some rules were practical, but many were symbolic, designed to remind citizens that misfortune had consequences, both natural and supernatural. Superstition played a central role. When a village faced famine or plague, the unknown demanded an explanation. People blamed angry gods, vengeful spirits, or curses whispered on the wind. Laws arose to appease these forces. Perhaps a law forbade cutting a certain tree, not because of the wood's value, but because the spirits of the forest were said to dwell there. Perhaps another law punished someone for spilling salt, or for whistling at night, as if the tiniest act could invite disaster. And then there was power. Leaders knew that laws could shape behavior in ways beyond mere survival. They could enforce hierarchy, mark social divisions, or instill fear as a form of obedience. A king could forbid citizens from wearing certain colors, eating certain foods, or owning particular possessions. To follow such laws was to acknowledge the ruler's authority. To break them was rebellion in miniature. Sometimes, panic created temporary laws. When danger threatened suddenly an invasion, a disease, a famine, communities enacted strict or unusual regulations, often overnight, banishing cats, restricting movement, or forbidding certain gatherings might seem bizarre in hindsight. But in that moment, it made sense. Anything that could prevent chaos or assign blame was worth trying. The strangest laws often sit at the intersection of fear, superstition, and power. They are attempts to control what cannot be fully controlled. The wildness of nature, the unpredictability of human behavior, and the mysteries of the world beyond our senses. And yet, as strange as they seem to us today, they reveal a fundamental truth. Humans will always try to make sense of the uncertain by creating rules, however unusual they may appear. Tonight, as we prepare to journey further into the laws of ancient civilizations, keep this in mind. Every law, no matter how strange, has a story rooted in human need for safety, for order, for understanding. And it is in these stories that the oddest, most fascinating regulations of history quietly wait to be discovered. In the golden light of the Nile, thousands of years ago, life moved in quiet rhythms dictated by the river, the sun, and the land. For the people of ancient Egypt, survival meant understanding these rhythms and respecting the world in ways that might seem peculiar to us now. Among the many laws they followed, one stands out for its simplicity and its strangeness: the protection of the humble onion. To us, onions are ordinary. We chop them for flavor, bake them into dishes, or let their scent linger in the kitchen. But in ancient Egypt, onions were far more than food. Their round, layered form symbolized eternity. Their pungent aroma was believed to ward off evil spirits, and so harming onions or using them improperly was not merely wasteful, it was a legal offense. Priests and officials took these regulations seriously. Laws dictated how onions could be cultivated, stored, and offered in religious ceremonies. Stealing or damaging them could bring harsh punishment. The onion, though small, became a sacred object, protected under law, much like the treasures of the pharaohs themselves. This law teaches us something profound about ancient societies. Laws often reflect what a culture holds sacred. In Egypt, where the line between the mundane and the divine blurred, even the most ordinary object could take on cosmic significance. The onion was more than food, was a symbol of life, death, and eternity. To ignore its sanctity was to ignore the order of the universe itself. And yet, there is a gentle humor in the thought that humans once debated the moral weight of a vegetable, that the legal system once extended its reach to the layers of an onion. In these small, peculiar laws, we glimpse the humanity of the past, the care, the fear, and the imagination that shaped societies long ago. As night falls and we drift further back in time, remember the onion. Remember that what seems strange now once mattered profoundly, and prepare, softly, to meet other laws just as unusual, each a window into the minds of those who lived centuries before us. In the quiet streets of ancient Egyptian towns, cats prowled silently, weaving between market stalls, temple steps, and riverbanks. To modern eyes, they might have seemed ordinary household companions, agile hunters, creatures of habit. But in ancient Egypt, cats were far more than pets. They were sacred, mystical, and protected by law. Cats were believed to embody the favor of the goddess Bastet, a deity of home, fertility, and protection. To harm a cat, even accidentally, was considered a grave offense, one that could invoke divine punishment. Some laws were explicit. Killing a cat, even unintentionally, could be punishable by death. Temples sometimes offered sanctuary to stray cats, and households treated them with reverence, feeding them, grooming them, and allowing them free rein. The reasons were both spiritual and practical. Cats controlled vermin, safeguarding precious grain stores, which were essential for survival. Yet, beyond this practical function, their symbolic role in society was profound. To respect a cat was to honor the gods, to uphold order, and to maintain the invisible balance between humans and the divine. For the Egyptians, this law was not merely a regulation. It was a reminder of humanity's fragile place in the universe. Cats embodied the mysterious forces of protection, luck, and sacredness. To break the law was to risk more than punishment. It was to invite chaos into one's home, one's family, and even the community. Tonight, as we imagine these sacred cats slipping through temple corridors and sunlit courtyards, consider the quiet power of law in shaping respect for life, both ordinary and extraordinary. In the protective gaze cast upon these small, silent hunters, we see a society deeply attuned to meaning, symbolism, and the delicate threads that connect the natural and the divine. And with that reverence in mind, we turn next to the grand, sometimes harsh world of ancient Mesopotamia, where laws could be even more striking and, in their own way, just as human. Long before modern courts, long before lawyers and judges, there was Hammurabi, king of Babylon, who ruled nearly 4,000 years ago. He left behind one of the most famous legal codes in history, a stone monument inscribed with hundreds of laws. And yet, as we read these rules today, some seem curious, harsh, and even oddly specific. Hammurabi's code covered nearly every aspect of life: property, trade, family, and labor. Some laws are familiar in concept: punishments for theft, rules about contracts, protections for widows. Others, however, strike us as peculiar. They dictated the precise measurements for bricks in construction, the weight of bread loaves and even the conduct of barbers and builders. If a builder constructed a house that collapsed and killed its owner, the builder could face death. If a physician performed surgery incorrectly, the result might be amputation of their own hand. These laws seem severe, yet they reflect the logic of a society seeking order in unpredictability. In a world where mistakes could mean life or death, where personal disputes could escalate into violence, and where resources were limited, strict consequences were a way to protect the community. Every rule, no matter how odd, had a purpose: to teach responsibility, deter wrongdoing, and maintain balance. Hammurabi's laws also reveal how human nature shaped law itself. Punishments were often tied to social hierarchy. The wealthy and powerful could face lesser consequences than the poor or slaves. This might seem unfair, but it mirrors the reality of ancient Babylonian society, where power and status dictated survival. Tonight, as we imagine the shadowed streets of Babylon, the river shimmering under the moon, and the merchants and farmers navigating a web of laws carved in stone, we glimpse a world both harsh and deliberate. The strange specificity of Hammurabi's code is a testament to a civilization striving to impose clarity on chaos, to anchor society in rules, and to teach its people that every action had consequence. And so, as we drift further back in time, let us prepare to wander into the silk-laden streets of ancient China, where laws would again surprise us with their peculiar precision. In the misty valleys and bustling cities of ancient China, silk shimmered like liquid sunlight, soft, delicate, and incredibly rare. It was more than just fabric, it was a symbol of wealth, status, and imperial power. And because of its extraordinary value, the production and possession of silk were strictly controlled by the state. Hoarding silk, or producing it without permission, was considered a serious offense. The government tightly regulated who could raise silkworms, who could weave the threads, and who could trade the final product. To break these rules was to challenge the emperor himself, and punishments could be harsh: confiscation of goods, fines, or even forced labor. The reasoning behind these laws was both economic and political. Silk was a cornerstone of trade, a source of wealth, and a symbol of the empire's authority. If ordinary citizens amassed silk outside official channels, it threatened the balance of power and the control of the state. The law, then, was a means of preserving order in both commerce and society. Yet, from our modern perspective, the strictness of these laws seems remarkable. Imagine being forbidden to keep a piece of cloth you worked for, or being punished for weaving a thread of beauty in your own home. And yet, for the people of the time, these regulations were logical. Even protective, they safeguarded the empire, prevented inflation, and maintained social hierarchy. Tonight, as we picture the soft rustle of silk in imperial workshops, the careful hands tending silkworms, and the watchful eyes of inspectors ensuring compliance, we glimpse a world where law extended into the most delicate aspects of daily life. Even something as beautiful and simple as silk could become a matter of life, loyalty, and law. And now, with the glimmer of silk fading behind us, we journey next to the curious civic laws of ancient Greece, where the very notion of participation in society could become a legal obligation. Imagine the sun-drenched streets of Athens, the chatter of philosophers, the clatter of sandals on stone, and the lively debates echoing across the agora. In this birthplace of democracy, citizens were expected to participate actively in public life, and for those who shirked this responsibility, there existed a law that seems unusual to modern ears: the law against the lazy citizens. In Athens, civic participation wasn't optional. Voting, attending assemblies, and taking part in jury duty were not just rights, they were obligations. If a citizen chose to remain idle, avoid duties, or disengage from public affairs, the state could impose fines, public shaming, or even temporary suspension of privileges. This law wasn't merely about maintaining order. It was about preserving the very foundation of democracy. The reasoning was simple. A society depends on the involvement of its people. Without participation, decisions fall into the hands of a few, and fairness collapses. To the Athenians, laziness wasn't merely a personal fluid, was a threat to the city-state itself. And so, what may seem like a strange, almost humorous law to us was, in their world, vital. But there was also a subtle lesson in this law. It reminds us that in every era, societies develop rules that reflect their deepest values. For the Athenians, engagement, debate, and shared responsibility were sacred. Laws were not just about punishment, they were tools to cultivate virtue, responsibility, and community. As night falls, imagine the quiet reflection of a citizen who has spent the day wandering the agora, pondering the responsibilities of participation. In that moment, law and life intertwine, teaching obedience, civic duty, and the importance of connection. Next, we will drift north to Sparta, where even money and the very notion of wealth was controlled by law in ways that seem extraordinary today. In the rugged hills and disciplined streets of ancient Sparta, life was unlike any other city-state in Greece. Here, strength, obedience, and communal loyalty were prized above all else. But one of the most unusual Spartan laws wasn't about fighting, training, or loyalty. It was about money, or rather, the absence of it. Sparta forbade its citizens from using gold or silver coins in daily life. Instead, the state used heavy iron bars, almost worthless in trade outside the city. The law was designed to discourage greed, corruption, and the accumulation of personal wealth. By limiting the role of money, Sparta aimed to keep its citizens focused on communal goals, military readiness, and civic responsibility, rather than material ambition. The reasoning is fascinating. Money, after all, can create inequality, envy, and distraction. By neutralizing its power, Sparta sought to forge a society where everyone was equal in purpose and dedication. Wealth could not elevate one citizen above another, nor could it distract them from the disciplined life the state demanded. To outsiders, this law seems extreme, almost unthinkable. Yet for the Spartans, it made perfect sense. They believed that true value lay not in coins or possessions, but in loyalty, courage, and service. In a culture so focused on survival and collective strength, limiting wealth was a form of social control, yes, but also a form of protection. As night settles softly over the Spartan plains, imagine the clink of iron bars, the quiet discipline of citizens, and the rigorous training of young warriors. In this world, law and philosophy intertwine. Even something as ordinary to us as money became a tool of social engineering, a reflection of values that prioritized community over individual desire. Next, we will cross back to the grand city of Rome, where laws controlled not only life, but luxury, love, and the very air one breathed. In the bustling streets of ancient Rome, marble temples gleamed under the Mediterranean sun, and markets overflowed with olives, wine, and spices from across the empire. Life seemed rich and abundant, yet not everyone was free to enjoy it equally. Rome, like many civilizations, had sumptuary laws regulations that controlled what citizens could eat, wear, and display. These laws were often oddly specific. Certain foods, like oysters or peacock, could only be served at the tables of the wealthy elite. Clothing, colors, fabrics, and jewelry were regulated to distinguish social classes. A commoner wearing purple silk or gold embroidery could face punishment, as such displays were reserved for the upper echelons of society. Even the number of guests at a banquet could be limited by law, as overindulgence was seen as both immoral and destabilizing. The reasoning behind these laws was both practical and symbolic. By controlling luxury, Rome sought to maintain social hierarchy and prevent envy or social unrest. These laws also reflected a deeply ingrained cultural belief: moderation was virtuous and excess was dangerous. To flaunt wealth publicly was not only illegal, it was a moral failing, a challenge to the order of society. Yet, from a modern perspective, these rules can seem strange or even humorous. Imagine being fined for eating the wrong seafood, or facing censure for wearing the wrong color to dinner. And yet, in the crowded, competitive streets of Rome, these laws helped define identity, maintain balance, and subtly remind citizens of their place in the social order. As twilight descends over the forum, imagine the patricians adjusting their togas, the merchants eyeing their neighbors' tableware, and the whispers of law guiding every action. In these small, peculiar restrictions, we see a society striving to control not only behavior, but desire, appearance, and the very symbols of status. Next, we will explore Rome's unusual family laws, where personal relationships were subject to rules as strict and surprising as those governing food and clothing. In the sprawling city of Rome, law was everywhere, not only in the marketplace or the Senate, but deep within the walls of homes, where family life unfolded under the watchful gaze of the state. Roman family laws, many of which now seem strange or even harsh, governed marriage, inheritance, and even life and death within households. The paterfamilias, the head of the family, held extraordinary power. He could arrange marriages for his children, approve or forbid unions, and control property and finances. In extreme cases, he even had the legal authority to punish or, tragically, execute family members who violated the law or brought dishonor. While these powers sound cruel today, they were intended to maintain order, loyalty, and the continuity of the family line, which was considered essential for the stability of society itself. Other laws dictated the treatment of marriage and children. Divorce, adoption, and inheritance were carefully regulated, and punishments could be applied for adultery or failure to produce heirs. Laws surrounding dowries, guardianship, and the status of slaves within the household reinforced social hierarchy, reflecting the Romans' belief that personal relationships were inseparable from civic duty. Perhaps the most unusual aspect of Roman family law was how it blurred the line between public and private life. What happened inside the home was not merely a personal matter, it was a legal matter. Laws intervened in family quarrels, punished misbehavior, and ensured that each household contributed to the moral and social fabric of the city. As night falls over Rome, imagine the quiet tension in candlelit villas, the careful obedience of children, and the stern oversight of fathers maintaining order. In these peculiar family laws, we glimpse a society where law was a guide not only for public conduct, but for the intimate rhythms of daily life. In the winding streets of medieval Europe, the smell of freshly baked bread often filled the air, tempting passersby and sustaining communities alike. But for bakers, bread was more than food. It was a legal matter, closely monitored by a set of rules that might seem peculiar to modern eyes. Some towns even appointed officials, sometimes called the bread police, to enforce these regulations. Bakers were required to maintain exact weights and measures for loaves, and violations could lead to fines, public shaming, or even corporal punishment. Selling underweight bread was considered a serious crime, for it threatened the well-being of citizens who relied on daily bread as their main sustenance. Ingredients were sometimes regulated too, with laws dictating the type of grain or the proportion of flour to water. The reasoning behind these laws was simple. Bread was survival. In a world where famine, disease, and poverty were constant threats, every loaf mattered. Ensuring that bakers followed strict guidelines protected the health of the community and maintained trust in local markets. Breaking the law wasn't just about cheating customers, it was seen as endangering society itself. Yet there was a human side to this strictness. Town criers would publicly announce punishments, and bakers caught cheating might be displayed for all to see, sometimes with a sign detailing their crime. The spectacle served both as a warning and as a reminder that law and morality were intertwined in daily life. As night falls and the aroma of warm bread fades from the streets, imagine the careful hands of bakers weighing each loaf, the watchful eyes of local officials, and the quiet reassurance of citizens knowing their food was safe. In these seemingly small, peculiar laws, we glimpse a medieval world striving for fairness, stability, and survival, one loaf at a time. In medieval towns, long after the sun had dipped below the horizon, silence was more than a comfort, it was a necessity. Streets were narrow, homes crowded, and the night held dangers, both real and imagined. And yet, for some, the quiet hours were filled with song, laughter, or celebration. To keep order, some towns enacted a law that may sound strange today, a ban on singing after dark. The reasoning was a mix of practicality and superstition. Nighttime could conceal criminals or wild animals, and loud noises might draw attention to unsuspecting households. More mysteriously, people believed that voices raised after sunset could attract spirits, demons, or other supernatural misfortune. Singing or even shouting at night was not just a social disturbance. It was a potential threat to the safety and spiritual well-being of the community. Enforcement of the law could be surprisingly strict. Offenders might face fines, public scolding, or even temporary confinement. Town guards or local officials patrolled the streets, ensuring that the peace of the night remained unbroken. And while the law may seem whimsical now, in a time when light was scarce and fear of the unknown was constant, it was a practical measure to preserve calm and order. There was also a quiet beauty to the rule. By curbing noise, the law allowed the natural rhythms of the night to unfold: the rustle of leaves, the flow of a distant stream, the hum of nocturnal life. It created spaces for reflection, rest, and the gentle unfolding of dreams. Tonight, as you imagine medieval streets falling silent under a starlit sky, consider the careful balance between law, safety, and human behavior. Even something as simple as song could become a matter of regulation, revealing a world attuned to both the practical and the mystical. In the grand courts and bustling streets of the Holy Roman Empire, appearance was more than vanity, it was a reflection of social rank, loyalty, and respect. Even the smallest detail of attire could carry meaning, and among these, feathers played an unexpected role. Some regions enacted a peculiar law, a tax or outright restriction, and feathers used in clothing, hats, and decorations. Certain feathers, particularly those bright, exotic, or rare, were reserved for the nobility. Commoners were forbidden from wearing them, and violating the rule could result in fines or public reprimand. The law served multiple purposes. It reinforced social hierarchy, displayed the wealth and prestige of the elite, and prevented ordinary citizens from imitating their rulers. In essence, a feather could signify rank as powerfully as a crown or scepter. The reasoning behind the law was both symbolic and practical. By controlling who could display which feathers, authorities maintained order, emphasized hierarchy, and curbed potential challenges to social norms. The law also reflected the broader human impulse to regulate desire, reminding citizens that beauty, status, and elegance were privileges, not rights. There is a quiet poetry in this regulation. Imagine the careful selection of feathers in a nobleman's hat, the shimmering plume swaying with each step, a tiny emblem of authority and refinement. At the same time, picture the ordinary townspeople, aware of their limits, respecting the invisible lines drawn by law, yet finding subtle ways to express individuality within those boundaries. As night falls over medieval towns and imperial courts, the soft rustle of feathers fades into the hush of evening. In this small, strange law, we see a society deeply conscious of status, appearance, and the subtle forces that maintain order, a world where even the lightest plume carried weighty significance. In the candlelit halls of medieval Europe, music floated softly through stone corridors, filling chambers with harmony and sometimes controversy. Music was not only entertainment, it was believed to have power over mood, morality, and even the spiritual world. In some regions, this belief led to laws regulating musical notes, forbidding certain intervals that were thought to summon misfortune or disrupt divine order. The reasoning behind these laws was rooted in superstition and moral concern. Certain dissonant notes were considered evil or unsettling, capable of tempting listeners toward sin or inviting spirits into the human realm. Musicians who strayed from prescribed scales risked fines, bans from performance, or public censure. In churches, courts, and even private gatherings, the law guided the creation of sound as carefully as it governed behavior, attire, or commerce. These regulations reveal how deeply law could intertwine with culture. Music was not merely an art, it was a social and spiritual instrument. Controlling it was a way to shape thought, maintain moral order, and protect communities from unseen dangers. It may seem strange now to think that a single note could be illegal, but in a world where the mystical and the material were inseparable, such rules made profound sense. Imagine a lutenist plucking delicate strings, careful to avoid forbidden intervals, aware that the harmony of each note could affect the world around them. The air itself was a stage for law, morality, and superstition intertwined, a reminder that in medieval life, nothing was truly trivial. In the shadowed streets of medieval towns, the figure of the executioner was one of both fear and fascination. Tasked with carrying out the harshest sentences of the law, this person occupied a unique and often isolated position in society. But even someone with such grim responsibilities was not free from the rules that governed daily life, especially when it came to love and marriage. Across various regions, laws dictated whom executioners could marry. Often, they were required to marry within their caste or profession, or sometimes forbidden from marrying at all within the local community. This was not arbitrary. It reflected the uneasy mix of respect and fear that surrounded their role. Executioners were essential to law, yet their work made them socially suspect. Laws surrounding their personal lives were designed to maintain social order while ensuring that these figures remained loyal, discreet, and separate from ordinary citizens. In some towns, executioners were also limited in where they could live. Their homes might be set apart near the edges of the town, reinforcing both their authority and their separation. Marriage, in this context, became a legal tool to manage relationships, inheritance, and social cohesion. The executioner's personal life was, in a sense, a continuation of the law itself, life under regulation, even in the intimate sphere. As we imagine the quiet life of an executioner's household, it is a world of paradox, fear and respect, isolation and duty, power and regulation. Even those who enforce the law are shaped and constrained by it. Tonight, as darkness settles over medieval towns, we see that law touches every life, high or low, gentle or grim. Even the most feared citizens are bound by rules designed to preserve order, propriety, and social balance. In medieval Europe, color was never merely decorative, was a statement of status, wealth, and social order. Certain hues were reserved for royalty, nobles, or clergy, and laws strictly dictated who could wear which shades. To wear a forbidden color was not just a fashion mistake, it was a legal violation. Purple, for example, was the color of kings. Its vibrant dye came from rare sea snails, making it both expensive and symbolic. Commoners caught wearing purple faced fines, public shaming, or confiscation of garments. In some towns, even other bright colors, red, green, or gold, were regulated, reflecting the subtle hierarchy of social rank and privilege. These laws served several purposes. They reinforced social structure, preventing ordinary citizens from imitating the elite. They maintained moral and visual order, signaling respect for authority, and they underscored the power of symbolism. Color was more than a pigment. It was a marker of identity, obedience, and societal harmony. Imagine a bustling medieval marketplace where merchants, townspeople, and nobles navigate these unwritten and written rules of dress. A misstep could attract the gaze of local officials, a whispered reprimand, or even a fine. Yet, within these restrictions, people still found subtle ways to express personality through patterns, accessories, and carefully chosen fabrics. As night falls over the stone streets, the soft flicker of torchlight illuminates the carefully regulated world of color, reminding us that even something as simple as what one wears can carry weighty significance. In these small but deliberate rules, law and culture intertwine, shaping society in ways both visible and invisible. In the misty highlands of Scotland, centuries ago, fear of witches ran deep. Magic was real lore, at least it was believed to be, and laws reflected that fear. Among the strangest of these regulations was the practice codified in some towns, the witch ducking ordinance, which mandated the testing of accused witches by immersion in water. The method was simple, though chilling. A suspected witch would be tied and submerged in a body of water. If she floated, it was taken as proof of guilt, for it was believed that water, being pure, would reject evil. If she sank, she was considered innocent, but sometimes, tragically, this led to drowning. The law gave authorities a legal framework for conducting these tests, blending superstition, fear, and judicial procedure in ways that seem almost unimaginable today. The reasoning, grim as it was, stemmed from the desire to protect communities from perceived harm. Witchcraft was thought to cause illness, crop failure, and misfortune. In a society without modern science, the law attempted to quantify the intangible, to assign evidence to the invisible forces believed to surround daily life. Yet this law also demonstrates how fear can twist justice. It created a system where survival, suspicion, and authority collided, often with tragic consequences. The ducking ordinance is a stark reminder of the power of belief and the sometimes deadly intersection of law and superstition. As night falls over the Scottish lochs, imagine the silent waters reflecting moonlight, the villagers whispering fears, and the trembling accused waiting for the law to decide her fate. In these strange, fear-driven laws, we see how societies attempt to control the unknown, even when the cost is human life. In the bustling streets of medieval and early modern England, ale was more than a drink, it was a daily staple, often safer than water, and a vital part of community life. Yet the enjoyment of this humble beverage was strictly regulated by law. The ale licensing laws required taverns, brewers, and even home producers to obtain permission to sell their beer, and violations carried serious consequences. The reasoning behind these laws was both practical and moral. Authorities sought to prevent drunkenness, maintain public order, and ensure that brewing met certain standards. Ale was sometimes diluted or adulterated, and without regulation, poor quality beer could lead to illness or social unrest. By controlling production and sale, the law aimed to protect citizens and preserve civic stability. Interestingly, the laws often extended into peculiar territory. Brewers could be fined for brewing at the wrong time of year, for selling below regulated prices, or for failing to meet strict quality standards. Even the size and shape of mugs could be dictated by local ordinances, ensuring fairness and consistency. Imagine the lively English taverns, the hum of conversation, the clink of mugs, and the watchful eyes of local officials ensuring compliance. These laws shaped daily life in ways both visible and subtle, reminding communities that even leisure, something meant for enjoyment, was subject to oversight. Tonight, as you picture the flickering candlelight and the aroma of freshly brewed ale, consider how deeply law infiltrated everyday life. Even something as familiar and comforting as a drink carried with it rules, regulations, and the weight of authority. In feudal Japan, the samurai were more than warriors. They were symbols of honor, discipline, and social order. And at the center of their identity was the sword, a weapon so sacred that it was considered the soul of its bearer. Yet even in a society devoted to martial skill, laws strictly governed who could carry a sword, how it could be worn, and under what circumstances it could be used. These samurai sword laws were precise and exacting. Only members of the samurai class were permitted to carry the katana in public, while commoners were strictly forbidden. The design, length, and method of wearing the sword were also regulated, ensuring that status, authority, and tradition were visually and legally enforced. Violating these rules could result in severe punishment, including confiscation or execution. The reasoning behind these laws was both practical and symbolic. Limiting the carrying of swords prevented social chaos and violent uprisings. It also reinforced the hierarchy, reminding everyone of their place within society. The sword was not just a weapon. It was a legal and cultural instrument that maintained order, discipline, and honor simultaneously. Imagine the quiet streets of Edo, the polished swords glinting in sunlight, the disciplined gait of samurai walking with purpose. Every edge, every sheath, every gesture was a reflection of law, ritual, and social harmony. Even in a society built around martial prowess, the law guided behavior, ensuring that power was both respected and contained. Tonight, as we drift into the soft glow of lanterns and the distant sounds of the city, consider how law shaped not only survival but identity. In Japan, even the sword, a symbol of strength and freedom, was tethered to rules designed to protect, regulate, and honor the social order. In the cold courts of 17th century Russia, under the rule of Tsar Peter the Great, facial hair became more than personal style. It became a matter of law and taxation. Peter, eager to modernize Russia along Western European lines, introduced a peculiar law. Men who wished to keep beards had to pay a special tax. Those who refused to pay were forced to shave, and officials even issued tokens as proof of payment. The reasoning behind this law was both political and cultural. Beards were traditional symbols of Russian identity and religious devotion. By taxing them, Peter sought to encourage Western customs, control appearances, and assert state authority over personal choices. It was a subtle but clear message. Obedience and conformity were intertwined with civic duty. This law extended beyond mere money. Failing to comply could result in humiliation, public shaming, or forced shaving in front of others, a symbolic act demonstrating submission to the Tsar's vision. The beard tax exemplifies how seemingly trivial personal traits can become a tool for social engineering, control, and the assertion of power. Imagine the quiet tension in Russian towns as men adjusted their collars, ran combs through their whiskers, and handed over coins to officials. In each shaved chin, a story of obedience, modernization, and legal influence is etched into history. Tonight, as we picture the snow-dusted streets and the glint of polished cheeks under lamplight, consider how law shapes not only behavior but identity. Even something as personal as a beard could become a regulated symbol of societal transformation. In some towns of England, centuries ago, law stretched into the most unexpected corners of daily life. One of the strangest regulations recorded was the ban on walking backwards in public streets. While it may sound humorous today, the law was taken seriously and enforced by local authorities. The reasoning behind this curious rule was rooted in safety and social order. Walking backwards was seen as dangerous. It could lead to accidents, collisions, or disruptions in crowded marketplaces. More intriguingly, some believed that walking backward could invite misfortune or evil spirits, reflecting a lingering medieval superstition that orientation and direction held mystical significance. Violations could result in fines or public admonishment. Town criers or local constables might warn citizens against such behavior, turning a simple act into a matter of civic responsibility. The law illustrates how societies often regulate not only actions with immediate consequences, like theft or violence, but also behaviors thought to influence fate, safety, and social harmony. Imagine narrow cobblestone streets, townsfolk bustling with carts, children, and animals, all moving forward, aware of the law that forbade reversing direction. In that scene, the line between practicality and superstition blurs, showing how law could guide behavior. even in the most unexpected ways. Tonight, as we picture the quiet streets under a moonlit sky, consider how strange yet purposeful laws can be. Even a backward step could become a legal matara, reminder of how human imagination and caution shaped rules throughout history. In the clean, orderly streets of modern Singapore, one law stands out for its peculiarly strict nature: the ban on chewing gum. Introduced in 1992, this regulation may seem trivial or even humorous, but it was created with a serious purpose: to maintain public cleanliness and prevent vandalism. The reasoning behind the law is practical. Before the ban, discarded gum clogged public transportation doors, littered sidewalks, and became expensive and time-consuming to remove. By prohibiting the sale and import of chewing gum, authorities aim to protect public infrastructure and community spaces. Limited exceptions exist today, such as gum for medical purposes, but the overall regulation remains one of the strictest in the world. The law also reflects Singapore's broader philosophy: collective responsibility and social order take precedence over individual habits. A small act, like chewing gum, can ripple outward, affecting cleanliness, efficiency, and the smooth functioning of a city. By controlling this minor detail, the law reinforces a culture of respect, responsibility, and shared civic duty. Imagine walking through Singapore's spotless pavements, sparkling public transport, and quiet order. In this environment, a simple piece of gum becomes a symbol of control, consideration, and lawfulness. The ban teaches us that laws are not always about morality or punishment. Sometimes they are about preserving a shared quality of life. Tonight, as you picture the quiet streets and the absence of litter, consider how law shapes not only behavior but the very feel of a city. Even the smallest indulgence can carry legal weight. In France, long before modern times, the naming of children was more than a personal or familial choice. It was a matter of law. Officials could reject names that were deemed unusual, offensive, or inconsistent with tradition. Parents were required to register names that adhered to cultural, religious, or societal norms, ensuring that a child's identity aligned with the values of the community. The reasoning behind this law was both practical and symbolic. Names carry power. They identify, distinguish, and integrate a person into society. Authorities believed that unusual or unconventional names could cause confusion, invite ridicule, or even undermine social cohesion. By regulating names, the state sought to maintain order, preserve tradition, and ensure that citizens' identities conformed to a shared cultural framework. Imagine a registrar in 18th century France, carefully reviewing each birth registration, rejecting some names while approving others. The process could seem restrictive, yet it reflected the society's emphasis on harmony, propriety, and continuity. Parents had to navigate both love for their child and compliance with the law, delicate balancing act that shaped generations. Tonight, as you imagine these quiet offices and meticulous records, consider how even something as personal as a name became subject to regulation. In these rules, law reaches into the intimate corners of life, guiding not only behavior but identity itself. In the United States, amidst the bustling towns and sleepy countrysides, one law may strike modern readers as particularly odd: a regulation forbidding the mailing of homemade pies. At first glance, it seems whimsical, even trivial, but it was enacted with practical concerns in mind. The reasoning behind this law was public safety and commerce protection. Homemade pies could spoil during transit, leading to health risks from foodborne illnesses. The law also protected commercial bakeries, ensuring that food products sold to the public met safety standards and sanitary regulations. By regulating what could be sent through the postal system, authorities aimed to prevent illness, maintain trust in commerce, and uphold community well-being. Enforcement was rarely dramatic, but it reinforced an important principle, even seemingly small. Everyday items can have wide-reaching consequences if left unchecked. The law reminds us that legislation is not always about morality or punishment. Sometimes it is about practical governance and public protection, even if the rule sounds amusing today. Imagine a quiet rural mailbox, a homemade pie carefully wrapped for a distant relative, and the invisible web of regulation that ensures it either arrives safely or is prevented from traveling at all. In this scenario, law touches even the sweetest, most domestic corners of life. Tonight, as you picture the soft aroma of baked goods and the stillness of small-town streets, consider how human ingenuity and caution shape the rules around us. Even the simplest acts, like sharing a pie, can intersect with law in unexpected ways. In the sunburnt expanses of Australia, a curious law once regulated something as ordinary as potatoes. Certain regions enacted rules forbidding citizens from possessing more than 50 kilograms of potatoes. At first, it seems absurd. Why limit access to a staple food? Yet the reasoning was practical and deeply tied to agriculture, trade, and pest control. These laws were primarily designed to prevent hoarding and ensure fair distribution. Potatoes were vital to local food supply, and excess stockpiling could disrupt markets, drive up prices, or create shortages. Additionally, large quantities stored improperly could attract pests or disease, threatening both private crops and community health. By regulating possession, authorities aimed to protect both farmers and consumers, ensuring stability in supply and pricing. The law also reflects a broader principle of governance. Controlling abundance can sometimes be as important as controlling scarcity. Even something as humble as a potato could affect economic balance, public health, and social harmony. Imagine a small Australian farm in the early 20th century. Sacks of potatoes carefully measured, the farmer ensuring he stays within the legal limit. In this seemingly minor act, we see the intersection of law, practicality, and human behavior, a reminder that legislation often reaches into the smallest, most mundane details of life. Tonight, as you picture fields of potatoes basking under the sun, consider how laws shape not just behavior, but the very rhythms of daily existence. Even a common vegetable can become a matter of regulation, reflecting the careful balance societies strive to maintain. In the windswept landscapes of Iceland, a quiet but unusual law governs one of the most personal aspects of life. What parents may name their children. Iceland has a naming committee that must approve all given names, ensuring they are compatible with Icelandic grammar, culture, and tradition. The reasoning behind this law is deeply cultural. Names are not merely identifiers. They carry heritage, pronunciation, and linguistic harmony. The committee ensures that names can be integrated seamlessly into the Icelandic language, protecting both children from potential ridicule and the language from erosion due to foreign influences. Names that are difficult to conjugate, clash with grammar, or could cause harm to the child are rejected. This regulation also reinforces the community's shared identity, emphasizing continuity and respect for tradition. Parents may not always appreciate the restriction, but it is a subtle way of balancing personal choice with collective cultural preservation. Imagine a small Icelandic office where parents submit forms with carefully considered names, waiting as officials deliberate on letters and syllables. Even the most imaginative choices are measured against centuries of linguistic traditions. Here, law touches identity, blending personal expression with the needs of society. Tonight, as the northern lights shimmer across the sky, consider the quiet power of law in shaping both culture and individuality. Even the name we carry can be a product of legal guidance, cultural preservation, and shared human values. In the pristine mountains and lush valleys of Switzerland, one law might make travelers chuckle. It is illegal to hike naked in public. While Switzerland is known for its natural beauty and outdoor lifestyle, this regulation was introduced to balance personal freedom, public decency, and safety. The reasoning behind the law is practical. Hiking trails often pass near homes, villages, and other hikers. Public nudity could cause offense, incite complaints, or create social tension. Additionally, hiking naked poses risks from sunburn, cold, or injury, which could place a burden on emergency services. By regulating attire, authorities sought to maintain order, safety, and respect for others enjoying the outdoors. Enforcement is rare and generally situational, yet the law stands as a reminder of how even personal behavior in nature can intersect with social norms. It highlights the delicate balance between freedom and responsibility, showing that laws can extend into surprising areas of everyday life. Imagine hiking along a Swiss trail at dawn, the crisp mountain air, the soft rustle of leaves, and the invisible boundaries of law guiding behavior, even in solitude. In this small but peculiar rule, we see society's attempt to harmonize individual liberty with communal respect. Tonight, as we picture the sun rising over jagged peaks, consider how laws reflect cultural values and expectations, guiding even the most private human behaviors. In the streets of Victorian England, a quiet revolution was stirring. The bicycle, sleek, two-wheeled, and freeing, it promised mobility and independence. Yet, for women, this simple invention collided with societal norms and, in some areas, legal restrictions. Certain towns imposed laws or regulations that discouraged or restricted women from riding bicycles, citing reasons ranging from health to morality. Doctors and moralists warned that cycling could harm a woman's reproductive health, disrupt delicate nerves, or provoke indecent behavior. Authorities sometimes enforced regulations on clothing, insisting that skirts remain long and modest, or even discouraged riding in public spaces altogether. The law was a reflection of deep cultural anxieties about changing gender roles and the boundaries of propriety. At the same time, bicycles became symbols of emancipation. Women who defied these restrictions challenged social hierarchies, expanded their personal freedom, and subtly reshaped public perception. The laws intended to maintain control ironically highlighted the transformative power of mobility and independence. Imagine quiet cobblestone streets, women carefully mounting bicycles, skirts rustling, aware of the scrutiny from authorities and neighbors. Each ride was an act of courage and quiet defiance, a negotiation between law, custom, and personal aspiration. Tonight, as the evening mist settles over Victorian towns, reflect on how laws attempt to regulate even personal freedom, Even something as simple as a bicycle ride could challenge society, provoke debate, and shape the course of social history. In the heart of ancient Rome, a unique and sacred institution existed: the Vestal Virgins, priestesses tasked with maintaining the eternal flame of Vesta, goddess of the hearth. These women enjoyed privileges rare for their time, yet their lives were tightly governed by law. Breaking a vow of chastity was considered a grave crime, not only against the individual or the state, but against the gods themselves. The punishment for transgression was severe. A Vestal virgin found guilty could be buried alive. This law may seem shocking to modern sensibilities, yet it reflects the intertwining of religion, law, and societal order in Rome. The Vestal's chastity symbolized the security of the city. Violation of this law threatened both divine favor and public stability. The reasoning was deeply symbolic. In a society where religion and politics were inseparable, laws often enforced spiritual morality as a matter of civic duty. By punishing infractions in such a stark manner, Rome sought to maintain order, reverence, and the perception that the state and gods worked in harmony. Imagine the solemn rituals of the Vestal Temple, the eternal flame flickering in the dim light, and the heavy weight of legal and religious expectation pressing upon the priestesses. In this world, law was both protector and enforcer, linking human action to cosmic consequence. Tonight, as we drift into the quiet of Roman streets and temples, consider how law can embody belief, shaping behavior through fear, devotion, and societal responsibility. Even divine service was not beyond regulation, and obedience became both spiritual and legal. In the bustling streets of the Ottoman Empire, the aroma of roasted coffee beans filled the air, drawing people into the newly popular coffee houses. These were not merely places for drinking. They were centers of social life, political discussion, and intellectual exchange. But with influence came suspicion, and authorities soon introduced a series of peculiar laws regulating coffee houses. Certain cities imposed restrictions on gatherings, opening hours, and behavior within these establishments. Coffee houses could be closed for political dissent, banned for excessive debate, or strictly monitored to prevent seditious talk. Coffee itself became a regulated commodity, and proprietors faced fines for failing to comply with laws on preparation, sale, or service. The reasoning behind these laws was clear. Coffee houses were hotbeds of communication and potential unrest. The Ottoman authorities sought to control information, maintain public order, and prevent gatherings that might lead to rebellion. At the same time, these regulations reflect a subtle acknowledgement of the coffeehouse's power, its ability to shape thought, influence opinions, and foster social change. Imagine the warm interiors of a coffeehouse, the clatter of cups, the murmur of conversation, and the invisible presence of law guiding what could and could not be said. These spaces, so ordinary today, were once arenas where legality and social life intertwined in very tangible ways. Tonight, as the steam rises from a freshly brewed cup, consider how law governs not only actions, but spaces of thought, dialogue, and connection. Even something as seemingly simple as a coffee house became a stage for social control and legal oversight. In the winding canals and ornate streets of Renaissance Venice, masks were more than a festive accessory. They were a symbol of identity, status, and social freedom. Yet, as with many aspects of Venetian life, law carefully regulated their use. Certain laws dictated when, where, and by whom masks could be worn, blending tradition, public order, and social hierarchy. Masks could be worn during carnival, for theatrical performances, or in private festivities. But wearing them at the wrong time, more in public streets, outside sanctioned events, could lead to fines, public reprimand, or even imprisonment. Authorities feared that anonymous faces could enable crime, mischief, or sedition, turning a simple disguise into a potential threat to civic safety. The reasoning behind these laws balanced celebration and control. Venice valued both spectacle and security. By regulating masks, the state allowed for social expression while preventing the chaos that could accompany anonymity. Masks became a metaphor for law itself, a visible marker of freedom, yet bounded by rules to maintain order. Imagine the moonlit canals, masked Venetians gliding past palaces, their faces hidden but their movements watched, aware of the delicate balance between revelry and regulation. In this city of water, law flowed alongside culture, shaping both behavior and identity. Tonight, as the soft reflections of lanterns shimmer across the canals, consider how even joy and play are influenced by law. In Venice, a mask was not merely a mascot, was a regulated instrument of society, culture, and control. In the southern United States, laws sometimes reflect the quirks of culture and local tradition. One of the most famously specific examples comes from Georgia. A regulation once reportedly prohibited eating fried chicken with a fork. While it may sound humorous, this law highlights the intersection of law, custom, and cultural identity. The reasoning behind such a regulation was largely about tradition and social etiquette. Fried chicken, deeply rooted in Southern culture, was considered a food best enjoyed with one's hands. Using utensils was seen as improper, disrespectful to tradition, or even a comical affront to local customs. By enforcing this rule, communities sought to preserve shared practices and maintain a sense of cultural cohesion. Though enforcement was likely rare and informal, the law remains a striking reminder of how legislation can extend into the most mundane and personal behaviors. Emphasizing respect for heritage and local norms, it's a playful example of law intersecting with identity, etiquette, and social expectation. Imagine a small diner in Georgia, plates of golden fried chicken served hot, patrons laughing and eating with their hands, and the faint, invisible presence of an old law reminding everyone of local tradition. Even in something as ordinary as dinner, law and culture intertwine, shaping behavior in ways both subtle and humorous. Tonight, as the aroma of fried chicken lingers in the imagination, consider how law reaches into our daily rituals, sometimes in the most unexpected and entertaining ways. In the golden sands and towering monuments of ancient Egypt, the tombs of pharaohs and nobles were more than resting places. They were sacred spaces, repositories of wealth, and portals to the afterlife. To protect these treasures, Egyptian law imposed severe penalties for stealing from tombs, including death. The reasoning behind this law was a combination of religion, fear, and social order. Egyptians believed that disturbing a tomb or taking its contents could anger the gods, disrupt the deceased's journey in the afterlife, and bring misfortune to both the thief and the community. Tombs were not merely property, they were spiritual sanctuaries, legally and morally protected. Enforcement was strict. Grave robbers who were caught could face execution or long imprisonment, and tombs were often guarded with traps, curses, and intricate security measures. The law served not only to protect property, but to reinforce respect for the divine and the continuity of society as moral and religious framework. Imagine the desert winds whispering over the pyramids, silent guards watching over the stone corridors, and the meticulous care with which tombs were sealed. In this world, law and religion were inseparable, shaping behavior through fear, reverence, and societal expectation. Tonight, as the golden sun sets over the Nile, consider how law can be both protective and moralistic. In ancient Egypt, breaking a rule wasn't just a crime, it was an offense against society, religion, and the eternal order. In the medieval kingdoms of Europe, horses were not just transportation, they were symbols of status, power, and military strength. Riding was essential, yet it came with risks, and in some towns, laws were enacted to regulate even the act of falling off your horse. The reasoning behind this peculiar law was both practical and social. Falling off a horse in public could cause injury to the rider, damage property, or disrupt crowded streets. It could also indicate poor training, negligence, or lack of discipline, which, in a hierarchical society, reflected badly on one's family or guild. The law served to maintain public safety, social order, and personal responsibility. Enforcement could involve fines or public admonishment. While today it might seem amusing to criminalize a stumble, in a society where mobility, status, and skill were intertwined, falling from a horse was more than clumsiness, it was a matter of public concern. Imagine a bustling medieval market, horses trotting along cobbled streets, riders carefully maintaining balance, aware of both social expectations and the invisible hand of law. In this strange intersection of humor, caution, and regulation, we see how law permeated even the smallest gestures of daily life. Tonight, as you picture the rhythmic clatter of hooves fading into the evening, consider how societies have long sought to govern behavior in ways both practical and peculiar. Even a fall could carry legal weight. In imperial China, a person's family name was far more than a label, it was a symbol of lineage, honor, and social position. Laws surrounding names were strict, ensuring that family names were passed down correctly and that no one could adopt or alter a surname without proper authorization. The reasoning behind these laws was deeply social and hierarchical. Family names tied individuals to ancestors, preserved property rights, and reinforced social structure. Unauthorized changes could disrupt inheritance, create confusion, or even be seen as a challenge to the social order. By regulating names, authorities preserved continuity, respect for ancestry, and societal stability. Violations could lead to penalties ranging from fines to social censure. Families took these rules seriously, and names were recorded meticulously in household registers. In this way, the law intertwined with identity, property, and lineage, making something as personal as a name a matter of civic importance. Imagine a quiet Chinese village, scrolls of family records carefully maintained, officials verifying names, and children growing up under the watchful eyes of both family and state. Even in daily life, the law quietly shaped identity, tying personal choice to collective heritage. Tonight, as lanterns flicker over rice paddies and temple bells echo, consider how law can govern not only behavior but ancestry and legacy. In imperial China, a name was more than identity. In several countries around the world, including parts of Africa and Asia, civilians are prohibited from wearing military camouflage patterns. At first glance, this may seem like a minor or even humorous restriction. but the law reflects concerns about safety, authority, and social order. The reasoning behind the law is practical. Camouflage clothing could be mistaken for military personnel, leading to confusion, fear, or even dangerous situations. By restricting the use of such patterns to authorized forces, governments maintain clear distinctions between civilians and the military, ensuring public safety and reinforcing authority. Violations can result in fines, confiscation, or legal penalties. The law also symbolizes the broader principle that appearances matter. What someone wears can convey power, affiliation, or status, and regulating clothing can prevent misrepresentation, impersonation, and disorder. Even in fashion, society draws lines that are sometimes enforced with law. Imagine a bustling marketplace, colors vivid under the sun, yet certain patterns forbidden. The invisible presence of the law guides behavior, shaping what people wear and how they present themselves to the world. In this small but deliberate way, society protects order and safety. Tonight, as the sun sets and shadows stretch across streets and fields, consider how law governs appearances as well as actions. Even something as ordinary as clothing can carry legal significance. In medieval Europe, birds were more than mere creatures of the sky. They were symbols, omens, and sometimes considered messengers of the divine. Among the many curious laws of the time, some regions enacted strict regulations forbidding the killing of swallows. The reasoning behind this law was a mix of superstition, ecology, and practical benefit. Swallows were believed to bring good fortune, herald the arrival of spring, and even protect crops from insects. Harming these birds was seen as a way to invite misfortune or offend nature itself. By protecting swallows, communities maintained both spiritual balance and agricultural well-being. Enforcement varied, but penalties could include fines or public admonishment. The law reflects a society attuned to the rhythms of nature, where the human and natural worlds were deeply interconnected. It also demonstrates how legal systems often extend beyond immediate human concerns, encompassing the unseen and symbolic dimensions of life. Imagine quiet medieval villages, thatched roofs glistening in morning dew, swallows darting overhead, and villagers careful to respect the laws that protected these small but significant creatures. Even the smallest acts of cruelty were subject to regulation, guided by both superstition and practical wisdom. Tonight, as the birds settle in their nests and the sky darkens, consider how law can reach into the natural world, protecting not just people, but the symbols, creatures, and rhythms that sustain life. In the austere lands of ancient Sparta, law shaped life from the very first breath. The Spartan legal system placed childhood education under strict state control, with the goal of producing disciplined, strong, and loyal citizens. From birth, children were subject to a regime of rules, inspections, and training designed to serve the city-state. The reasoning behind these laws was both practical and militaristic. Male children were taken from their families at a young age to join the Agoj, a state-run program emphasizing physical fitness, combat skills, endurance, and obedience. Girls were trained in physical fitness and household management, preparing them to maintain strong Spartan families. Every aspect of a child's upbringing was legally guided to strengthen the community and ensure the survival of the state. Enforcement was strict and often harsh. Weakness or failure could be punished, and excellence was rewarded. These laws reveal a society in which the collective good outweighed individual preference, and where childhood itself became a matter of civic regulation. Imagine young Spartans running through open fields, enduring rigorous drills under watchful eyes, their lives shaped by law long before adulthood. In Sparta, education was inseparable from governance, and discipline was both a personal and legal expectation. Tonight, as the sun sets over the rugged hills of Laconia, consider how laws can shape individuals from birth, guiding not only behavior but character, identity, and loyalty. In Sparta, the law began early and touched every corner of life. In the bustling cities of ancient Babylon, law governed not only crime but also economics. One of the most striking regulations concerned debt slavery, a system in which those unable to repay loans could be compelled to work for their creditors. The reasoning behind this law was both economic and social. Debtors who could not fulfill their obligations were required to serve their creditors temporarily, ensuring that debts were honored and societal order maintained. The system also offered protections. The Code of Hammurabi, one of the oldest known legal codes, set limits on the duration of servitude and prohibited extreme mistreatment. This law highlights the intersection of justice and survival. It was a practical mechanism for resolving financial disputes, deterring reckless borrowing, and maintaining the balance of wealth and power. Yet it also reflects how legal systems can restrict personal freedom in the name of economic stability. Imagine the sun-baked streets of Babylon, merchants counting clay tablets, and citizens navigating a world where failure to repay a loan could transform their life into servitude. Law here was not abstract, it shaped every transaction, every livelihood, and every human relationship. Tonight, as the lamps flicker in the courtyard, consider how law governs both freedom and obligation. In Babylon, survival itself was bound by regulation, illustrating the ancient roots of economic and social control. In the narrow, winding streets of medieval French towns, public sanitation was more than a matter of hygiene, it was a legal concern. Certain towns enacted laws forbidding urination in public spaces, reflecting both practical and moral considerations. The reasoning behind this law was straightforward, yet multifaceted. Open urination posed serious health risks, spreading disease and contaminating water sources. At the same time, it violated social norms of decency and order. Penalties often included fines, public shaming, or temporary detention, emphasizing that law extended into even the most private bodily functions when public welfare was at stake. These regulations also highlight the challenges of urban life in the Middle Ages. Streets were crowded, waste disposal systems were rudimentary, and maintaining communal cleanliness required legal enforcement. By regulating behavior, authorities sought to protect both health and social harmony. Imagine torchlit streets at night, townspeople wary of breaking the rules, and officials patrolling to enforce the law. Even the most ordinary acts were guided by legal expectation, turning daily life into a careful balance between necessity, morality, and regulation. Tonight, as the quiet streets settle into darkness, consider how law shapes not only public spaces but private behavior. Even the most natural human acts can be subject to regulation when the welfare of society is at stake. In the canals and marketplaces of Renaissance Venice, commerce was tightly regulated, and even the handling of fish became a matter of law. One of the more peculiar regulations forbade citizens from carrying dead fish on Sundays. The reasoning behind this law blended religion, hygiene, and social norms. Sunday was a sacred day for rest and worship, and commercial activities, especially handling perishable goods like fish, was discouraged. Authorities sought to preserve the sanctity of the day, prevent unpleasant odors and public nuisance, and maintain the rhythm of communal life. By restricting the transport of fish, the law enforced both spiritual observance and practical cleanliness. Imagine the bustling Venetian fish markets on other days, with merchants shouting, the smell of the sea in the air, and the lively chaos of trade. On Sundays, however, the streets were quieter. Citizens respectful of law and custom, carrying their routines into harmony with religious observance. Tonight, as gondolas drift silently through moonlit canals, consider how law intersects with religion, commerce, and daily life. Even the handling of humble fish became a regulated act, revealing the intricate ways societies balance work, devotion, and order. In Victorian England, where townhouses were close together and streets narrow, domestic life often collided with communal expectations. One curious regulation prohibited beating rugs or carpets before 8 a.m., reflecting a blend of practical concern and social harmony. The reasoning behind this law was simple yet thoughtful. Early morning noise could disturb neighbors, especially in densely populated areas where sound carried through thin walls. At the same time, cleaning practices needed regulation to maintain order in public and private spaces. By setting time limits, authorities balanced personal chores with community respect, ensuring a quieter, more harmonious environment for all. Imagine a quiet English street at dawn, shutters closed, and the soft murmur of morning routines beginning. A housewife or servant prepares for the day, careful to respect both the law and the sleep of neighbors. Even seemingly mundane acts like cleaning were guided by civic expectation, showing the reach of law into everyday life. Tonight, as the morning sun gently rises, consider how societies use law not only to regulate major crimes, but to maintain daily civility and mutual respect. Even the beating of a rug becomes a matter of legal awareness and community consideration. In the heart of classical Athens, law extended even into the ways citizens honored the dead. Funeral oration speeches delivered at public funerals, particularly for fallen soldiers, were carefully regulated by law and custom. The reasoning behind this regulation was both civic and moral. Funeral orations were not merely expressions of grief. They were public acts that reflected on the city-state, celebrated valor, and reinforced collective values. Speakers were expected to follow traditional forms, praise the state, and avoid inappropriate personal commentary. Improper speeches could dishonor the deceased, disrupt social harmony, or misrepresent the virtues of Athens itself. This law demonstrates how speech and ritual were bound together by civic responsibility. Orators were trained and supervised, ensuring that even moments of mourning served a broader social purpose. It was a subtle yet powerful way of maintaining order, respect, and civic identity. Imagine a quiet Athenian agora, citizens gathered in somber assembly, the soft cadence of a measured speech filling the air, and the weight of law shaping every word. In this society, even public mourning was an act guided by regulation, balancing personal expression with civic duty. Tonight, as torches flicker and shadows dance across marble monuments, consider how law can guide not only action but expression itself, shaping collective memory and societal values. In the bustling boulevards of Paris, a law once forbade singing in the streets, revealing a city deeply concerned with order, noise, and public decorum. While music and performance were valued, the regulation sought to balance artistic expression with the rights and comfort of residents. The reasoning behind this law was both practical and social. Streets were crowded, commerce thrived, and excessive noise could disrupt business, disturb homes, or create confusion. By controlling public singing, authorities maintained urban harmony, ensuring that the daily rhythm of city life proceeded without unnecessary disturbance. Enforcement could involve fines or warnings, and the law served as a subtle reminder that personal freedom was always balanced against communal well-being. Singing, while joyful, was not entirely private. In public spaces, it became subject to regulation. Imagine the lively streets of Paris at dawn, vendors arranging their stalls, citizens hurrying to work, and the invisible presence of law shaping behavior. In this world, even song was framed by civic responsibility and respect for others. Tonight, as the city settles into twilight, consider how law influences not only actions but expression, music, and the everyday sounds of life. In Paris, even joy must sometimes harmonize with order.